ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to stand before you today and speak about a truth that is both empowering and humbling. God will bless you in front of your enemies. This isn't just a promise to cling to, it's a reality we are called to walk in. Let me guide you through the key truths that anchor this promise in our lives. When we face adversity, especially when confronted by enemies or those who oppose us, our instinct is often to build walls around our hearts. We put on a facade of strength, pretending that nothing affects us, when in reality, we feel the sting of rejection, betrayal, or doubt. Society has conditioned us to equate vulnerability with weakness, teaching us that exposing our struggles or emotions makes us targets. But what if vulnerability isn't a liability? What if it's the key to unlocking a deeper sense of connection, growth, and strength? Vulnerability in the face of adversity is not about giving your enemies power over you. It's about reclaiming your own power by standing authentically in your truth. It's having the courage to say, "This hurts," or "I'm scared," without letting those feelings define or limit you. When you acknowledge your pain and fear, you allow yourself to process them, rather than burying them deep inside where they can fester and grow. Vulnerability lets light into the cracks, turning what could break you into an opportunity for healing. It takes immense bravery to be vulnerable. It's a radical act to face your enemies or your struggles and admit, "I am human. I feel this deeply." That kind of honesty strips away pretense and invites us to be more connected to ourselves, to God, and even to others. In doing so, we stop living in fear of being found out and start living in the freedom of authenticity. Vulnerability also creates space for growth. When you resist vulnerability, you build walls that keep out not only pain, but also the lessons adversity brings. Challenges, even those brought by enemies, can be some of life's greatest teachers. They reveal your strength, illuminate areas where you need to grow, and refine your character. By embracing vulnerability, you say, "I'm willing to learn from this moment, even if it's uncomfortable." That willingness is what transforms pain into purpose. Vulnerability deepens your relationship with God. It's in those moments of raw honesty, when you admit you can't handle it on your own, that you open yourself to His grace. When you're vulnerable with God, you invite Him into the places you've been trying to hide, and that's where His healing power is most evident. Vulnerability is an act of trust, a declaration that you believe He will see you through even when you feel exposed or unsure. Being vulnerable doesn't mean you allow yourself to be trampled or taken advantage of. It means you're secure enough in who you are and whose you are to acknowledge that you don't have all the answers. You don't need to have it all together to be worthy of love, respect, or success. Vulnerability is strength because it keeps you grounded in truth, and truth is unshakable. Enemies often thrive on the illusion of invincibility. They want you to believe you can't afford to show weakness. But when you embrace vulnerability, you disarm them without lifting a finger. You show that your power doesn't come from perfection, but from your willingness to be real. That authenticity, that openness, is what positions you for the blessings God has in store for you. Vulnerability isn't the end of your strength, it's the beginning of your transformation. The word enemies often conjures up images of people who openly oppose or harm us, those who stand in direct conflict with our goals, values, or well-being. But what if the concept of enemies is more nuanced? What if our true adversaries are not just external forces, but also the internal struggles we face? Redefining the idea of enemies challenges us to see beyond traditional labels and recognize the deeper, often hidden dynamics at play in our lives. In the traditional sense, enemies are those who actively work against us. They might criticize, undermine, or even sabotage us. But sometimes the greatest challenge is not their actions, but how we interpret them. Are they truly enemies? Or are they mirrors reflecting back the fears and insecurities we hold within ourselves? For example, someone who doubts your abilities might be amplifying your own internal doubts. Their words sting not because they create insecurity, but because they echo what you secretly fear might be true. When we redefine enemies this way, we begin to see them as opportunities for self-reflection and growth rather than obstacles to overcome. Enemies also come disguised as circumstances. Life's challenges, failure, rejection, or unexpected detours can feel like adversaries working against us. These moments can be deeply painful, but they often carry the seeds of transformation. A closed door can redirect you to a path that's more aligned with your purpose. A painful setback can teach you resilience, resourcefulness, and faith. When we stop seeing adversity as the enemy and start viewing it as a tool for refinement, we transform the narrative of our struggles. We begin to understand that even the most challenging experiences can be used for our good. Another layer to redefining enemies is recognizing that sometimes we are our own worst adversaries. Self-doubt, fear, procrastination, and negative self-talk can do more damage than any external opponent. How often do we sabotage our own progress by giving into the belief that we're not good enough or that success isn't meant for us? In these moments, the enemy isn't out there, it's the voice inside us that whispers lies about our worth and potential. Confronting this internal enemy requires honesty, self-compassion, and a willingness to challenge the narratives we've internalized. It's important to consider that those we perceive as enemies may not see themselves that way. Often people who oppose us are operating from their own pain, insecurities, or unmet needs. Their actions, while hurtful, might not be about us at all. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it does provide perspective. When we see enemies through the lens of empathy, we free ourselves from the weight of resentment and open the door to healing. We must acknowledge that God's perspective on enemies is radically different from ours. He calls us to love them, pray for them, and forgive them. Why? Because doing so transforms our hearts. It removes the power they have over us and aligns us with His grace. In this light, enemies are not barriers to our blessings, but catalysts for our growth. Redefining them isn't about diminishing the pain they cause. It's about recognizing their role in our journey and trusting that God can use even our adversaries to elevate us. In a world driven by likes, follows, promotions, and applause, it's easy to fall into the trap of seeking validation from others. We often measure our worth based on how people perceive us, striving to earn their approval through achievements, appearances, or conformity. But the truth is, worldly approval is fleeting, conditional, and often inconsistent. It can never fully satisfy the longing in our hearts because it is not the validation we were created to seek. Divine validation, the affirmation that comes from God alone, is the only validation that truly matters and endures. Worldly approval demands constant performance. It tells you that you are only as good as your latest accomplishment, as popular as your last post, or as valuable as your ability to meet someone else's expectations. Living for this kind of validation is exhausting because it's impossible to please everyone. What satisfies one person might offend another. What earns applause today could be forgotten tomorrow. The chase for approval is endless, and it leaves us feeling empty because it places our identity in the hands of others. Divine validation, however, is unwavering and unconditional. It is rooted in the unchanging truth of who God says you are: loved, chosen, redeemed, and worthy. Unlike worldly validation, God's approval isn't based on what you do, but on who you are as His creation. You don't have to earn it, it's freely given. When you truly understand and embrace this, it frees you from the pressure to prove yourself to others. You no longer have to conform to their expectations or chase after their fleeting approval because you are already enough in God's eyes. This doesn't mean that seeking affirmation or encouragement from others is inherently wrong. We all need connection and support. But the problem arises when we place worldly approval above God's truth in our lives. When we allow the opinions of others to dictate our worth, we make them idols, giving them power over us that they were never meant to have. On the other hand, when we anchor ourselves in God's validation, we can approach relationships and goals from a place of security rather than striving. Divine validation also gives you courage in the face of opposition. There will always be people who misunderstand, criticize, or oppose you. If your worth is tied to their approval, their rejection will shake you. But when you rest in the knowledge that God's opinion is the only one that matters, you can stand firm. You can walk in confidence, knowing that He sees your heart, understands your intentions, and is pleased with your obedience, even if the world doesn't acknowledge it. God's validation isn't just personal, it's purposeful. When He blesses you, it's often in ways that defy worldly standards. He lifts you up in the presence of your enemies, not to glorify you, but to glorify Himself through you. His blessings are a testament to His faithfulness and a reminder that His approval outweighs the world's. Divine validation aligns you with His purpose, giving your life meaning far beyond anything worldly applause could ever offer. When you focus on divine validation, you release yourself from the exhausting pursuit of perfection and the fear of rejection. You begin to live boldly, authentically, and with a peace that the world cannot give or take away. The approval of others may fade, but God's validation is eternal, and in that you can rest securely. Pain is an inevitable part of life. It comes in many forms: loss, rejection, failure, betrayal, and it often feels like a heavy burden we are forced to carry. Yet within the weight of pain lies the potential for transformation. Pain, while deeply uncomfortable, is one of life's greatest teachers. When approached with the right mindset, it becomes the catalyst for resilience, shaping us into stronger, wiser, and more compassionate versions of ourselves. Resilience is not the absence of pain, but the ability to endure it, adapt to it, and ultimately grow from it. It's the understanding that pain, though difficult, does not have to define or destroy us. Instead, it can refine us. To turn pain into resilience, we must first acknowledge it. Many people try to avoid or suppress pain, hoping it will go away if ignored. But pain that is buried only festers. Acknowledging pain is not a sign of weakness. It's an act of courage. It says, I see this for what it is, and I am willing to face it. Once pain is acknowledged, the process of transforming it begins. This requires a shift in perspective from viewing pain as something to fear or avoid to seeing it as an opportunity for growth. Pain often forces us to confront parts of ourselves we might otherwise ignore. It reveals our fears, our vulnerabilities, and our unmet needs. While this self-awareness can be uncomfortable, it's also empowering. It gives us the chance to address these areas and emerge stronger. Faith plays a crucial role in this transformation. When you trust that God can use your pain for a greater purpose, it changes how you endure it. You begin to see that your struggles are not in vain. They are not random or meaningless. They are part of a divine plan. In the Bible, we see countless examples of individuals who turned their pain into resilience by trusting in God's purpose. Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers, endured years of hardship but emerged as a leader who saved countless lives. His pain was not wasted. It prepared him for his destiny. In the same way, your pain can prepare you for a future you can't yet see. Pain also builds resilience by teaching us the value of perseverance. Every time we face adversity and choose to keep going, we strengthen our ability to endure. Resilience is like a muscle. It grows through repeated use. Each challenge you overcome adds to your reservoir of strength, making you better equipped to handle future difficulties. This doesn't mean the process gets easier, but it does mean you become more capable. Turning pain into resilience allows us to help others. When you've walked through hardship and come out stronger, you have a unique ability to support and encourage others who are struggling. Your pain becomes a bridge of empathy, connecting you to those who need hope. Resilience isn't just about surviving, it's about thriving in a way that inspires others to do the same. Pain is not the enemy, it's a teacher. And when you embrace its lessons, it transforms from something that breaks you into something that builds you. Resilience is the gift that pain leaves behind, a reminder that even in your darkest moments, there is light ahead. There is something profoundly humbling and awe-inspiring about receiving blessings publicly, especially when they come in the presence of those who doubted, opposed, or sought to diminish you. These moments are not merely personal victories, they are displays of God's grace designed to reveal His glory and remind us of His unwavering faithfulness. Public blessings carry a significance far deeper than the applause they might evoke. They are not about elevating you above others, but about showcasing the goodness and sovereignty of God. One of the most striking aspects of public blessings is their timing. They often come after seasons of pain, struggle, or obscurity. You may have felt unseen, undervalued, or even forgotten during those times. You may have wrestled with doubts, wondering if your prayers were being heard or if your faithfulness was in vain. But God sees what others overlook. He honors the tears you cried in private, the perseverance you showed when no one else was watching, and the faith you held on to when circumstances suggested otherwise. When the blessing finally comes, and it happens publicly, it serves as a powerful reminder that God's timing is perfect. He knows when and how to lift you up in ways that leave no doubt it was His hand at work. Public blessings are often misunderstood as moments of personal vindication, but their purpose goes beyond settling scores. When God blesses you in front of your enemies, it is not to humiliate them, but to demonstrate His grace and sovereignty. It's His way of saying, "This is my beloved, whom I have chosen to bless, not because they are perfect, but because of my mercy and love in these moments. The focus is not on you, but on the God who makes all things possible." The blessing becomes a testimony, an undeniable display of His power to transform lives and situations. These blessings also serve as a call to humility. When you are publicly elevated, it is tempting to let pride creep in. You might feel entitled to the recognition, especially if you've endured long seasons of hardship or opposition. But public blessings are not about proving your worth to others. They are about glorifying the one who saw your worth all along. Humility in the face of blessing keeps your heart aligned with God's purpose. It allows you to remain a vessel through which His goodness can flow to others. Another layer of public blessings is their impact on those who witness them. Your blessing might be the encouragement someone else needs to keep going. It might inspire them to trust God's plan for their own lives, even when things seem uncertain or unfair. For those who doubted or opposed you, your blessing can be a revelation of God's grace. It might soften their hearts or plant seeds of faith. Whether they celebrate with you or wrestle with their own feelings, the blessing has the potential to point them toward God. Public blessings are an invitation to stewardship. They come with a responsibility to use your elevated position wisely. Whether it's a new opportunity, recognition, or success, the blessing is not just for your benefit. It's a platform to serve others, to extend grace, and to honor God. And when He blesses us before others, it is an act of grace that calls us to reflect His love and faithfulness in everything we do. Courage is often misunderstood as the absence of fear, but true courage exists precisely because fear is present. It is the decision to move forward despite trembling hands, racing hearts, and uncertain outcomes. Fear is a natural response to danger, change, or the unknown. But courage is the deliberate choice to not let that fear dictate your actions. It's the strength to stand firm when everything in you wants to run, hide, or give up. Courage in the face of fear is not about being unshaken. It's about choosing to act even when you are. Fear has a way of magnifying obstacles. It whispers all the worst-case scenarios, highlighting risks and amplifying doubts. Fear tells you to play it safe, to shrink back, to avoid failure or rejection at all costs. While fear can protect you in moments of genuine danger, it can also paralyze you when there's no real threat, keeping you from stepping into opportunities or walking in your purpose. Courage, however, counters fear by reminding you of a greater truth, that you are not alone, and that there is a strength beyond your own carrying you forward. Faith is an essential companion to courage. When fear arises, it's often rooted in the belief that you are not enough, that you lack the ability, resources, or resilience to face what lies ahead. But faith reminds you that you don't have to rely solely on yourself. God's promises are clear. He will never leave you or forsake you, and his power is made perfect in your weakness. Courage fueled by faith is the kind that allows you to stand in the fire like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, trusting that even if the outcome isn't what you hope for, God is still with you. It's the kind of courage that David showed when he faced Goliath, not because he was stronger, but because he believed that God was greater than his fear. Courage also grows with practice. Every time you face fear and choose to act anyway, you build resilience. You prove to yourself that fear, while loud, doesn't have to control you. It's like exercising a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. Courage doesn't mean the fear goes away entirely, but it means you become better at moving through it. Each small act of bravery prepares you for greater challenges, building confidence in your ability to navigate uncertainty and risk. Courage has a ripple effect. When you act boldly in the face of fear, you inspire others to do the same. Your bravery becomes a light for those who are struggling to find their own. It shows them that fear can be overcome, and that the rewards of stepping outside of your comfort zone often outweigh the risks. Courage in the face of fear is about trusting the process, even when you can't see the outcome. It's about believing that growth happens in the tension between fear and action, and that the things you fear most often hold the keys to your greatest breakthroughs. Courage isn't about being fearless, it's about being faithful to the calling, the mission, or the purpose that is bigger than your fear. It's stepping out, shaking but determined, knowing that on the other side of fear lies freedom. Forgiveness is one of the most liberating yet misunderstood acts a person can undertake. Often mistaken for condoning wrongdoing or excusing hurtful behavior, forgiveness is not about minimizing the pain caused or pretending that the offense didn't happen. Instead, it is a deliberate decision to release the hold that anger, resentment, and bitterness have on your heart. Forgiveness is not for the benefit of the one who hurt you. It is for your own freedom. It is a gift you give yourself, allowing you to step out of the prison of past hurts and into a life of peace and renewal. When someone wrongs you, the natural response is to hold onto the pain, replaying the offense in your mind and nursing the wounds it created. While this response is understandable, it often traps you in a cycle of anger and resentment. These emotions, when left unchecked, can take root in your soul, affecting your mental and emotional well-being. Bitterness can cloud your judgment, sap your joy, and even harm your physical health. By refusing to forgive, you inadvertently allow the person who hurt you to continue having power over your life. Forgiveness is the key to breaking that cycle. It doesn't mean forgetting the hurt or denying its impact. It means acknowledging the pain, confronting it honestly, and then choosing to let it go. This act of release is not about the other person's worthiness to be forgiven. It's about your own worthiness to live unburdened. Forgiveness sets you free from the weight of carrying anger and resentment, which only serve to tie you to the past. Forgiveness also requires a shift in perspective. It asks you to see the person who wronged you not solely as an enemy, but as a flawed human being, much like yourself. We all make mistakes, hurt others, and fall short. Recognizing the shared humanity doesn't excuse the harm done, but it can soften your heart enough to let go of the need for vengeance. Forgiveness is an act of humility, acknowledging that you too have been forgiven by others and ultimately by God. Forgiveness is a commandment that reflects the character of God. He forgives us freely and abundantly despite our shortcomings. When we forgive others, we mirror His grace. This act of obedience isn't always easy, but it is profoundly transformative. It aligns your heart with God's and opens the door for His healing to flow into the wounds caused by the offense. Forgiveness is also a path to restoration, though reconciliation is not always guaranteed or required. Forgiveness doesn't mean you must rebuild the relationship or invite the person back into your life if doing so would be harmful. It simply means you release them and yourself from the burden of the past. Forgiveness is freedom. It frees your mind from the toxic grip of anger, your heart from the chains of bitterness, and your spirit from the weight of judgment. It's not an act of weakness, but of immense strength. By choosing to forgive, you claim ownership of your peace, allowing yourself to move forward unencumbered by the hurts of yesterday. It is one of the most powerful steps you can take toward living a life of wholeness and grace.